Hey guys, welcome back to Joko Yo, and we're going to get started with a new episode. It may be the fastest episode. You'll see in a second why I will call it such. But let's roll, huh? So, as I've told you guys in prior episodes, I grew up in Johnston County. I was even born in Smithfield in the early 70s, and it was impossible to grow up here and not be at least a little exposed to, racing. Because, between the Dukes of Hazzard, the Cannonball Run, Smokey and the Bandit, the NASCAR races that were on TV, heck, Hardee's, the restaurant Hardee's, even had their own Matchbox car. It was white, and it was the coolest car in my Hot Wheels / Matchbox collection. Even the recently departed Kenny Rogers had a movie about racing. It was called Six Pack. I saw it in the movies. Long before Talladega Nights, and even before the Days of Thunder with Tom Cruise, which was hilarious. Racing was, along with college basketball, a pretty big deal around here. But I was never really a fan. They say, you know when you go, so to speak. But I went to a race at Rockingham Speedway years ago before it was shut down, and it just didn't do anything for me. That's just me. Now, I'm not disparaging the event in the least, nor demeaning the taste of those that like racing. It was just not my thing, and the closest I have come to drag racing was not even at the Dunn Benson drag strip, but at the Pinewood Derby that I participated in as a Cub Scout in 1983. So now I will admit that I did get to see one race that I liked. It was on a dirt track when I was very young at the State Fairgrounds in Raleigh. That was pretty cool. The loudest noise that you hear at the State Fair is usually a tractor pull, but it's on that dirt track that I saw a dirt track race. Now, before anyone says that is not really racing, please be aware that that a lot of your famous NASCAR racers not only started on dirt tracks, but they continued to race on them long after their careers were established. Apparently, a racer named Tony Stewart was a big-time dirt track racer. On dirt tracks, you see, there are more wrecks, or at least it seemed that way to me, and to a young kid, a lot of wrecks. That's the exciting part of a race. In much the same way that for some people, the best part of hockey is the fistfights. Now, dirt tracks used to be a regular feature of early NASCAR, and the very last NASCAR dirt track race was at that same fairgrounds in Raleigh, where I saw a dirt track race as a kid. Now, I didn't see the last NASCAR dirt track race. I was born far too late for that. And I suppose I didn't have to go to Raleigh to see a dirt track race. Johnston had dirt tracks too, and some pretty big racing names raced on them. You may not know these names from the 50s and 60s now, but in that period, they were pretty much celebrities like Don Macon, Emmett Hare, Dick Mendenhall, Glenn Simpkins, and others these guys could bring a crowd to the Johnston County Speedway on a weekend, or Brown Speedway near Selma, and Johnston County Speedway was near Middlesex. You see, TV wasn't in every home, like Netflix and movies and shows on demand. We didn't have those things. And heck, a lot of houses in the 50s didn't even have indoor plumbing. People came from all around to watch the races, but the farthest someone ever traveled to come to a race in Johnston County, that's fairly legendary. It may be one of the longest trips ever. Now, the story certainly fits the criteria of legend. The Oxford English Dictionary says that a legend is a story that is historical but unauthenticated. Definition number 2 of legend is an extremely famous or notorious person. Well, the most famous trip to a Johnston County race fits both definitions. There's a roughly mile-long stretch just south of Smithfield and north of Four Oaks that used to host races, according to, again, this legend. On Sundays, during the colonial period, some pretty shady characters would have horse races, and of course, where there are horse races, there is gambling. Gambling on Sunday? Why, that sounds like the devil's work. And so does the cockfighting and the boxing and other forms of gambling and moonshine making that happened along that same stretch of road. Now, apparently, that particular stretch of road was a magnet for bad stuff to go down. In later years, this same stretch of road was used by Lord General Cornwallis in his Southern campaign. It was also called the Smithfield-Bentonville Road during the Civil War, and General Joseph Johnston of the Confederate military used it to get to Bentonville for the Battle of Bentonville and retreated on it on the same route to get away. And now during that Battle of Bentonville, Johnston, General Joseph Johnston, left most of the Confederate dead on the battlefield, and he loaded up as many wounded as he could to get them to medics. So, as he was retreating from the battlefield, so many of them died on that 14-mile trip that for nearly a decade, a person traveling that strip of road would see wooden slab after wooden slab with soldiers' names on them right beside the road, hastily buried on the retreat, but marked so that families could find their loved ones. Union soldiers were buried there too, but unlike the Confederate dead, the U.S. government dug them up and gave them proper burials in national cemeteries. The Confederates didn't get that opportunity. In more modern days, the swampiness of that same road has been a factor in many car wrecks. I personally knew 2 guys that died in a wreck on that same stretch of road. Well, in the 1890s, Sheriff C.S. Powell, and according to the records, he was not a very nice guy himself, was kept so busy by the goings-on along that one stretch of road that he seemed to be there like every weekend. Maybe that's why he and others told the following story of the most legendary visitor to that particular stretch of road. Now, as Sheriff Powell told it, the sinful stuff that went on along that position and that portion of Smithfield-Bentonville Road attracted the worst sort of people, as you can probably well imagine. To him, that included the Scottish followers of the great pretender to the English throne, Bonnie Prince Charlie. We've talked about him in this podcast a few times before. Powell went so far as to name families that participated in the no-good activities: McDaniels, McDonalds, McLeans, McDougals, McClams. He apparently didn't like those guys. But he also told of one particular Sunday during the colonial period, way before he was born, when there was a customary horse race with plenty of gambling. The regular crowd was there, and the horses lined up, and money began to change hands. And then the race started. Horses began to speed, and people were cheering on their favorite horse, and it was manic, and people were changing hands, changing money, and changing tickets, when out of nowhere came a black horse ridden by a shadowy rider with a black flowing cape. The horse joined the race that was already in progress, crossed the start line after so many had already left it, passed the starting line, and ran so fast that it quickly caught up to the other horses and passed those shocked riders. The crowd quieted as the horse kept going and passed the finish line and won, but then kept riding, completely out of sight and nowhere to be found forever. Now, according to Sheriff Powell, the horse blew smoke from its nostrils. Now, telling the story at least 100 years after the event, Powell said that the participants and the eyewitnesses to this particular event were certain that it was the devil himself, and were spooked enough that horse racing on Sunday and gambling stopped permanently. And from that point on, that stretch of road was called the Devil's Racetrack, which is what many Johnston County residents know it as today. That was a fun one. And even in this Coronaville land that I live in these days, I got more coming, and I hope you keep listening. And until next time, see ya. Be good.